Everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
But I wish it would rain. Oh, yeah. Cause so bad.
Pretty good choice of music, Dwayne. I think everybody in the province of British Columbia would wish it would rain right now, but not in their condo units, because that's not what any of us want, do we? I'm Tony Giventu, the host of Key Pacific Strata Life on 650 CIL. Thanks for joining us again. Gordon Lee from CMW Insurance is in the studio, and we're talking about insurance. We're talking about the different obligations, the different types of insurance. We just talked about the Strata Corporation's insurance policy and the homeowner's insurance policy, Gord. But what are the other types of policies that stratas have to, or owners have to look at with respects to the different types of business that's run?
There's several different, and I think, owners themselves need insurance, and then there's the owner who rents out the unit also needs insurance. That's a very common one that I see, that people don't have insurance because they go, well, why do I need it, right? I don't live there. It's my tenant's problem. And I kind of go, well, it'll become your problem because you are the unit owner. If something happens to your unit, they assess your deductible.
Right.
It's your responsibility. Something happens to your unit, causes damage to other people or injuries, that's your responsibility. So that's a common one that people really need to get coverage for, and I think that's overlooked.
So put that into context, though, that the deductible that's generated in the building, if I was responsible for it, so I hadn't been maintaining my dishwasher, or I overflowed my bathtub, or something occurred in my strata lot that I could be responsible for that caused a flood in the building, and that's water damage is the most common claim that we experience. It's quite possible that after all the dust is settled, the strata is going to be looking at me and saying, you need to pay this insurance deductible, which could be quite significant.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly where the usually owners that rent out units, that's the first thing that they figure out that becomes a problem. The other problem too is that, most likely their tenant's going to say, hey, is your dishwasher that leaked? I can't live in here while the place is being repaired. I'm breaking the lease, or
right.
I'm not paying rent for the next 2 months. So, then they'll go, well, shouldn't someone else pay, right? Or the unit owner go, well, that's not fair. But if they had proper insurance, then they can claim their insurance and get the rental income looked after, the deductible, if it's assessed to them afterwards, that will be all looked after.
So the big message for a landlord is that whether it's penalties, fines, costs, insurance deductibles, if your landlord causes it, you're going to end up paying for it probably. And hopefully you might have some recourse to recover it against the tenant if they were responsible, but
not likely.
Not likely. And really, at the end of this claim, you as the homeowner are going to be responsible as the landlord of this unit. You're going to be responsible for these claims associated with it, and it can get costly. What are insurance deductibles for strata buildings looking like right now?
These days, the average strata deductible, I would say, water damage for like a high-rise building, it's probably $20,000-$25,000. That's pretty standard. Townhouses a little bit lower, probably between $5,000 and $10,000. If they depends on the claims history. I can't imagine someone getting a bill for $25,000, Tony, and they go, why? And they say, well, because the water damage came out of your unit.
Right.
And at the same time, you get that phone call from your tenant saying, I'm not paying rent for the next 2 months. And
so it came out of your unit. It might not have been your responsibility, though. Could have been a common pipe that broke. It could have been a common asset of the strata that failed, causing the problem. But if there are things that are as a result of your responsibility, you very easily could be responsible for this deductible. How do people cover for that deductible?
Well, the coverage it's through their insurance policy, which is
their homeowner policy.
Homeowner's policy, deductible assessment. Now, that part also, I guess we should talk about a little bit. Over time, what we've seen is that a lot of companies have been paying these deductibles out, and as deductibles increase, they've been paying these large deductibles, like $20,000, $25,000. So there's quite a few companies now out there that have reduced that coverage. So they might say there's a cap is $10,000.
Right.
If you happen to have a bigger deductible, well, that's it. All we will cover is for 10. So even buying an insurance policy, whether you're owner occupy or a rented unit, you really need to go through those and ask the agent, what limit are you providing me? Or better yet, the easiest, take a copy of, your strata's policy,
right,
and show it to them and say, here's the deductibles. I need coverage for these things.
Well, we had an interesting incident occurred that 2 years ago that's really raised this for strata councils as well. Is that it as part of the annual report to the owners, they get a copy of the insurance binder, basically saying what's covered, the amounts, what the deductibles are. But the strata's insurance renewed a month after the AGM, and the deductible went from $10,000 to $25,000, which they did not report to the owners. And as a result of that, there was a water claim where an owner was responsible. And because they hadn't reported it to the owners through the arbitration, it was deemed that the owner was not responsible for the increase. So, Strata Corporation has as much of a duty of informing the owners as the owners have of informing their insurance providers, right? It's a downhill chain. It's a domino effect for everybody, right?
Yeah, it's very important to that this information is passed on properly. It's I'm sure that property manager ended up probably claiming their E&O, which their underwriters were not going to be very happy.
I don't know what the outcome of that was, but there were certainly discussions around that for not having provided a notice, again, subsequently to the owners that there was a significant change in the policy. And again, this occurs quite easily, though, because there's so much information that they have to be looking at and assessing the insurance each year to understand if there are new changes to the limits, if there are new exemptions, new conditions on the insurance. Who's the best person to tell you about that?
The broker.
The broker. That's the job of the broker, right?
Yep.
Right.
When, I think, my property manager goes, I got tenants or unit owners asking for different things that seem complex. So, have them give me a call directly or send me an email. I'll email them back. I'll CC you guys so everybody understands what's going on, and that's really important.
Right. What about commercial residential mixed buildings? That's a whole other side of the mix here.
You're talking about probably this various version of that, right? We have just mixed use buildings. We have that mixed use now with the sections,
right? And
then we also have airspace parcels,
right? So
the most basic one, I guess, is the mixed use. We insure it pretty well in the same manner.
Right.
The insurance company but usually we're talking about ground floor commercial. The commercial units are also another thing that the unit owners, so a lot of times I guess there's a huge percentage that people buy for investment and then lease out the property. That's the other problem is that, these leasehold improvements that are in there, that's another big discrepancy that's going on in the marketplace right now. Who's responsible? Like, I bought the unit. It's an office. It was fully finished with carpet and all that. Now there's a claim. I didn't get insurance on it. I thought the strata's responsible.
Right. So all the leasehold improvements, of course, are not part of the strata's assets.
Yes, and generally, commercial units are not. But then we get into, Tony, as we talked about before. But I think the developer, when the original guy bought it, they wanted some of these finishes done so that they would buy the unit that's negotiated. And so that goes into, what paperwork do you have to prove that? Because in standard practice, commercial stratas are pretty well at the bare four walls.
Right.
So I said, that's something that you should have probably got insurance for very low costs. Would have alleviated that problem. And if there's a discrepancy, you can let the insurance company deal with that.
We had an email that was kind of interesting from Sandra, and here's the gist of the email. They discovered a leak from the ceiling in their bathroom. It created, the usual damage to the paint and the drywall that occurred. They talked to the property manager. The plumber came in, and they discovered the leak is coming from the sprinkler system where the joint was welted, and that, of course, the insulation is wet. So we're talking about some common areas that have failed,
yes.
And we're talking about some of the damages. But the answer that the owner gets back, of course, is that they're going to be responsible for basically restoring the ceiling back to its original cost. So it's kind of a complicated problem, isn't it? And that's one of the issues that we come up across, is that when we have both the common area systems of a building and the insurable systems of a building that are affecting a strata lot, and it's a minor cost, it's kind of interesting to figure out the division of responsibility of that.
Absolutely.
It's a bit of a challenge to assess who's going to be responsible to do the maintenance. The basic rule is that owners are responsible to maintain and repair their strata lots, right? If it's an insurable claim, then the Strata Corporation's insurance will cover it, right? The other thing I think that we just need to remind listeners to is that people need to remember that it's not what was damaged what caused the damage, but it's what was damaged that determines whose insurance is going to cover it. So we get a big leak in a building. We talked about this on an earlier show. We have 14 units that are damaged. What was damaged are all those original assets and fixtures of the building. And that comes on automatically to a claim to the Strata's insurance.
That's right. And that's where, we have a lot of people also will tell us that, we got this issue. Why can't the Strata insurance pay for it? So basically, we'll get a call and says, the Strata's roof or the Strata's pipe leaked. And the Stratas come in to repair some of the stuff. My improvement, though, they're saying no to. And I don't have insurance. Why I don't understand is that since it's the Strata's responsibility for the pipe.
Right.
And what we explained to them that, whether the Strata's negligent or not for that burst of the pipe, that's something that you would probably need to prove in court.
Right.
In the event, if you had insurance, your insurance company would have paid for the damage to your property and your improvements. And if they felt there was negligence, they could possibly subrogate. But that's up to the insurance company. The issue here is that a lot of people, I think, also, when you live in a strata, because it is a bit of shared living, it's sometimes people feel it could be someone else's fault.
Right.
But proving that is another issue. And that's negligence, and that's a legal issue, I think, they need to deal with, which most individuals are not in the capacity to do so.
So simple takeaways out of this are what was damaged is first thing that we determine whose insurance is going to be responsible. Ultimately, that will be determined by an appraiser or by an adjuster who is going to determine whether there is a claim on the Strata's policy or not. If the amount is below the claim, then it is likely that the damage to each of the lots is going to be the responsibility of each of the Strata lot owners and their insurance providers. And if they don't have insurance, it still goes back to them anyhow because they have a responsibility to maintain and repair their Strata lot.
Yes.
So it's complicated, and in that we have all kinds of variations of buildings, all kinds of variations of policies, all kinds of variations of relationships between owners, and so it's a complicated problem. So, Gord, thanks so much for joining us on the show. It's been a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Tony.
I'm Tony Giuventu, host of 650 CIL's Talk About Strata. We'll be back right after these moments.
This is Experts on Call on CIL 650.